All right, well, good morning, Compass. Man, we're not only just proud of our graduating high school students, but all of those that were graduating first and second service, some that even weren't able to be here. I mean, we're proud of you, but it just reminds us of the ministry that we have. 2 students, 2 kids, 2 families in our community, and want to give you a quick update on the Carry Student Forward sort of campaign that we introduced last week, where we're trying to raise money so that we can buy transportation for our students and our ministries there. You guys have been amazing. And up until today, before today, we had brought in, like gifts received, had been almost $4,000 towards our $15,000 goal. My hunch is that a lot of, yeah, that's fine. You can clap. That's good. But I know a lot of you were bringing gifts back today, and maybe taking a week to think about it, or some of you didn't hear about it until today, and you saw in the lobby the big van, and we're trying to raise that amount, right, the $15,000 amount. So I am confident that that number is going to go up. But we just want to give you an update, and if you weren't aware of it, that was a way that you can partner with us to continue to minister to students and kids. Hey, we're going to continue in our series today in relations. And if you are a single adult, man, you have powered through. The last 3 weeks have really primarily been geared towards married couples. So, man, if you are single, like, today is your day. Like, I'm so glad that you're here, that you have stuck with us for that. And believe it or not, this is such an important demographic, not only in our church, but in our culture. In fact, the United States of America has more single adults than any other country on earth except India and China. Right? There are 8 billion people on the planet, and there are so many single people, and they just wonder, man, who is out there for me, right? If you ever feel like lonely, do you ever struggle with that as a single adult? You ever feel like in church, like everything is geared towards families or married people, but you're sort of neglected, you're sort of left out? Man, I hope that that's not the case, but in case you are tempted in that way, you feel like, man, I'm less of a person because I don't have a spouse. Man, today is a day where we're gearing things towards you. And we're going to address the loneliness that you might feel, always feeling like you're kind of a third wheel, an attachment to other stuff that's going on. You know, you go to bed alone, you wake up alone, you go to weddings alone. And here's the deal. Just because you're not married, just because you don't have kids, that doesn't mean that you are not a vital and essential part of our church family, or that God doesn't have amazing plans for your life right now. Now, I realize, I'm going to have a disclaimer right out the front, that today, as we're going to talk about struggles and temptations that single people have, right? Maybe it's already occurred to you, maybe to every single person in the room, that a married person is getting ready to talk about single adult life, right? And the struggles you face. And I realize that that's kind of a disconnect for some of you. So first of all, thank you for even listening, right, to me. If you're a single adult, thank you for even being willing to listen to me, to Joao. Married guys talk about our spouses and our kids and about relationships, and being willing to identify and connect with us even though we are not in the same stage of life as you. And we don't always communicate as well as we could or even should, but you are valued in our congregation. And so even defining what single adult is and what it means to be single can be a little tricky, and you do a little research on this and try to talk to different people, and you start to realize that, well, not everybody who is single thinks of themselves as single. Right? You get adults that are between 18 and 25. They don't think of themselves as not married so much as they think of themselves, well, I'm still a student. You know, I'm just getting started in my job, in my professional career. And so maybe there's not that acute understanding or thought of, oh, I'm a single adult. No, I'm just an adult. But then other people are single, and it's not necessarily by choice. Well, you've been trying to find a person to date, or you were with somebody, but they've recently broken that off, or maybe you were married and you've been divorced, or you've been widowed, and so you find yourself in this situation, and it's not where you wanted to be in life. Others of you are single by choice. You've chosen not to make the marriage commitment, but not every reason for choosing to be single is equally like noble. Right? There's some bad reasons to stay single, like, hey, I'm just really selfish. I don't want to share anything with another person, right? That could be maybe a motivation to stay single, but that's not necessarily a good motivation. Or maybe, I'm single by choice. Like I'm gonna be, active with another person. I'm gonna live together. We're gonna have sex, that kind of thing. But I'm just not gonna be committed. I'm not gonna be tied down in marriage. That's another reason why sometimes people are still single, and that's not necessarily a noble reason. But there are still some noble reasons, right? Some good causes that people choose to stay single. They choose not to pursue a relationship, maybe because they want to work on themselves first, or they want to finish school. They realize that they're going to be putting a lot of time and energy into their career, and they don't want to rob another person of that important attention. Or maybe they just want to have a closer relationship with God first. Jesus actually said in Matthew chapter 19, verse 12, some people choose to not marry for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. I gotta say, that's probably the most noble reason of all, to be single, so that you can be fully committed and free to serve God. Regardless of your reasons, if you find yourself single, or even if you're married, right, some of the stuff we're gonna talk about is really, really important, because even married people, when you are in a relationship, it is your responsibility in what you are bringing to the relationship. And the most important thing you can bring to a relationship with somebody else is the same most important thing that a single adult ought to be pursuing, and that is the most healthy self you can be. The most spiritually healthy, the most emotionally healthy, maybe the most financially healthy, or just physically healthy. All the different things that we ought to be pursuing and bringing before we bring them into another relationship. If we even do, maybe the most advantageous thing is to become the most spiritually, emotionally, physically healthy person you can be. And I recognize that all of us may be challenged by God in how we're living for Him, but there are some unique challenges, I think, for being single. In fact, some of those challenges I would consider to be temptations. Now, here's something interesting the Bible says about temptation, and we're going to kind of focus in on temptations that singles face, but really any temptation is something that we all are going to face. So the Bible says, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. Believe it or not, you are not alone when you face temptation. Other people face the same kind of temptations. And here's a promise about every temptation that you and I face, and that is that God is faithful. He won't let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, He'll provide a way out so that you can do it. He'll provide an escape route. Maybe you stayed in a hotel room, sometime you notice on the back of the door, they always post that evacuation plan. Like, should there be a fire, should there be a need to evacuate, here's your best route for escape. God does that for us. No matter what temptation we might be facing, God has provided an escape route. And the only question really is, are you going to use that? Are you going to take that? And so we're going to talk today about temptations that single people face. But then for each temptation, we're going to give you what I believe is an escape for that temptation or from that temptation. But married people, don't tune out. Don't tune out, because, again, the most important thing you bring to your marriage is a healthy you. And so for singles or married people, let's talk about some of these temptations and some of these things that we struggle with, and let's see how God might help resolve that so that we can be the people He's called us to be. You ready? Here's temptation number one. The temptation for single people, number one temptation for single people is living in limbo. Living in limbo. Right? You'll embrace a very temporary lifestyle because you have sort of pushed pause on living your life until whatever that big event is. I'm going to start living when, I meet the right person. I'll start living when I get married to the right person. Heard about one guy that bought a house. He's a single guy, and he bought a house, and he moved in, but he didn't buy any furniture. Like the real bachelor pad, full-on house, but he's like, mattresses on the floor, and he's got cardboard pizza boxes as his end table. I mean, just ridiculous stuff. And he was asked by his friends, why haven't you bought any furniture? Well, I plan to get married one day, he says, and I'm afraid that my wife won't like the furniture I buy. Listen, you could get married and your wife's not gonna like the furniture you're gonna like, right? I mean, that doesn't matter. You're not gonna live between now and then because you're hitting pause on your life until one day. You're missing out on the present, not being fully engaged in what's happening. And when we live our lives in limbo, when we hit pause on our development, we have a tendency to not really find contentment in anything. Right? Everything is constantly looking forward to a better fulfillment. You find it hard to be friends with somebody of the opposite sex, for example, because what you really want is to be dating. What you really want is to be in a romantic relationship. And so because it's not marriage, you can't really invest yourself in that friend. Or people say, I'll clean up my act when I meet the right person. I meet the right girl, I'll stop drinking. When I meet the right guy, then we'll start going to church. And the challenge is for singles to put life on hold. Listen, stop waiting for the wedding to start living your life. Marriage, to be honest, is overrated and over-idealized anyway. If we've said anything that's true about marriage, it's that we've built it up with all sorts of cultural expectations that probably exceed the expectations God ever placed on marriage. What I'm trying to say, friends, and if you're married and you agree with this, try not to visibly or audibly say amen to this, but for every single person who wishes that they were married, there's probably a married person who wishes they were still single. It's like the balloonist, the hot air balloonist who's postponed his trip in the hot air balloon. He said, listen, the weather is really, really bad, and I would rather be down here wishing I was up there than up there wishing I was down on the ground. And that's true about marriage too. Sometimes we're so disengaged with the present not because we're waiting for some future, but sometimes we're disengaged with the present because we're still preoccupied with the past. This is true for some single people. You're single because some relationship ended. And that rejection, that end has left you with bitterness. And you have a hard time moving forward in your life because you are still stuck in the hurt of your past relationship. Maybe somebody that you dated, maybe somebody you were married to, and they failed to keep up their end of the bargain. They broke promises. They lied to you. They cheated. They broke your trust, or they failed to just simply notice and appreciate all the good things about you. And you feel like in this stage that they still owe you something. That you still deserve the relationship, or you're owed a new marriage, or you're at least owed the time that you lost, what you spent with that person. And that bitterness has taken root, and you are tempted, rather than to live in the present, you are tempted to wallow in the past. Regardless of what it is that's tempting you to live in limbo, let me suggest that God has provided an escape for that temptation, and that is to appreciate the present. That you would appreciate and live in the present. Psalm 118:24 says, "This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." Philippians 4:11 says, "I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances." And I realize that in our society today, it can be difficult to understand how to be content when everything in culture seems to be pushing you towards being married. I mean, you got all sorts of TV shows, you got movies and television series, and everything seems to revolve around which guy and which girl are going to get together. I mean, just think about the game shows and reality shows that are on, shows about dating and shows about the bachelors and the bachelorettes, and that's not even really on TV anymore. And then you show Naked and Afraid, which I assume is about honeymoons, and you've got pressure at certain holidays like New Year's Eve and Valentine's Day, where you just feel all this tension and pressure, like, oh, I'm somehow missing out if I don't have a sweetheart. I'm somehow missing out if I'm not on the path towards marriage. There's this pressure, isn't there? And you feel it. And it starts early. You don't have to be a young adult to start feeling the pressure that society puts on being in a married relationship. My daughter Sadie when she was 3 years old, told me, Daddy, I know who I'm going to marry. And I'm thinking, I didn't even know that this was like an urgent thing, right, for you. I said, well, who are you going to marry, honey? She said, I'm going to marry you, Daddy. And I thought, oh, that's very sweet. I said, well, honey, I'm already married. She's like, well, in that case, I'll marry Bo. And I was like, who the crap is Bo? It's like, where did she get this idea? And I guess, Bo is like the young boy that was at the babysitter where she was at. And so they were, watching multiple kids, and she had already latched onto this kid. And I'm like thinking, good grief. So I just tried to put her at ease. I said, listen, honey, you don't need to worry about who you're going to marry, okay? When that day comes, Daddy will make the right decision, okay? But I mean, even the movies and the shows that she watches, you get the Disney movies and stuff that have the princess. Well, a princess is not a princess without a prince. And we accidentally teach this lesson from a very early age that something is missing in your life if you're not married. If you're not married or being pursued for marriage, then you're only half a person. And this cultural idea, no doubt, has crept into our church too, in a bad way. Like way over the top. I have heard churches that are so sort of blind to how they see this that they will talk about things and leave out single people and not even be mindful of it. There was one a church that names their life groups, kind of like we have names for our life groups, just so that people can have an idea of who is in sort of that small group and everything. And this life group was a life group that was decidedly for married couples and single adults. And they named the life group Pairs and Spares. Might as well just call it what it is, right? The third wheel, right? Married people, come on. Listen, especially in the church. Don't communicate, even unintentionally, that singles are less valuable because they're not married. Please. We get ourselves in all kinds of trouble here, right? We say things and we don't even mean it. It's kind of like, it's almost like you hope anyway that every guy understands that you never walk up to a lady and say, hey, when's your baby due, right? You never say that. Because inevitably, some woman that you say that to is going to say, I'm not pregnant. And then what are you going to say? Are you sure? I don't know, what are you going to? At that point, the toothpaste is out of the tube. You're in trouble. But what we need to understand is we do the same thing without even thinking about it when we talk to single adults. Right? Here's some phrases on behalf of all the single adults in our room. Hopefully you can get an amen from them. On behalf of them, here's some phrases I would hope, especially if you're married, you please do not say this to single adults, okay? Stop saying, now why aren't you married yet? Don't say that, right? Don't say, hey, stop looking for a mate. God will send somebody to you when he's ready. And they're like, yeah, easy for you to say. Or you see them talking to somebody else of the opposite sex, and you say, hey, something going on there? Somebody's Facebook status getting ready to change? So annoying, right? Or you ask them, hey, you like start playing matchmaker. Hey, have you ever thought about, and you mention somebody's name who you think is like single, and like, it's so awkward, okay? Or the all-time worst, well, if you want to meet someone wonderful, you need to be someone wonderful. Good golly. All right, so Ephesians 5:16 tells us that we need to make the most of every opportunity, not wasting our lives, not wanting and waiting and delaying until things move on to some other stage. And I think at the very least, for singles, I think that means don't live in limbo. Right? And for those of us who are married, don't add to the cultural pressure that leads others to feel like they need to live in limbo. The Bible actually says that single adults have an advantage over married adults, right? The Bible says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, in the Message paraphrase, says, I want you to live as free of complications as possible. When you're unmarried, you're free. All right, there's more. All right, when you're unmarried, you're free to concentrate on simply pleasing the master. Marriage involves you in all the nuts and bolts of domestic life and in wanting to please your spouse, leading to so many more demands on your attention. The time and energy that married people spend on caring for and nurturing each other, the unmarried can spend in becoming whole and holy instruments of God. I'm trying to be helpful and make it as easy as possible for you, not make things harder. All I want is for you to be able to develop a way of life in which you can spend plenty of time together with the Master without a lot of distractions. Listen, if you're single, you have an advantage over every married person in the room when it comes to your relationship with God. So don't wait to start living. You start living now. You start running the race that God has marked out for you. And here's a cool thing just to think about. If you will do that and you will start running out on the course that God has put for you, you start gaining some momentum and you start getting some distance behind you, then take a look around and see who's running with you. That might be somebody worth pursuing. You don't wait, if you're single, to have relationships with other people. You invite people over for lunch. If you're single, you make friends. You serve people. In fact, you might be in a place where you have the advantage of a little bit more flexibility and free time in your schedule where you could help a family who needs assistance with their special needs child. I mean, you could come and be a caregiver for somebody who's got an elderly parent. You could be somebody that goes and does yard work for somebody who can no longer do that for themselves. I mean, you just think about the ways that you have opportunity to serve because you are free from some of those obligations and demands. I guess you could do that, or you could use your flexibility to stay home and Netflix and chill. Don't put your life on hold. God's called you to an amazing, abundant life today. So let's make the most of our opportunity. Second temptation that I think young adults that are single face is to settle for less. Honestly, it's not just young adults. I think it's any age adult. If you find yourself single, your temptation is to settle for less. It's kind of like whenever I do this, when you do this, you go out to the grocery store when you're hangry. This is never a good equation for healthy options, okay? When you're hungry and you go to the grocery store, everything looks good, even when you know it's not. I mean, Twinkies start to look nutritious, and you'll find like there's weird things in your cart when you buy them and you take them home, and you're like, who bought the Spam? It's like, I don't know, but in the moment, it was right, okay? And if I could just say this, listen, single adults, when you are single, sometimes there is such a temptation to satisfy a need that you will settle for less than something that is healthy. Right? You've convinced yourself that you're desperate, and you'll even go to church and somehow manage in church to find, that one person who's not right for you. And I guess the message would simply be this. Ladies, some of you are dating guys, and today you really ought to put them back on the shelf, okay? Some of you guys, you're dating some ladies that need to be restocked, all right? One journalist was sharing her story of living as a single woman in Las Vegas. She said about clubbing, her clubbing experience, I hate having to come here to this bar. I hate waiting in line. I hate how the guys look me up and down as if I were a piece of meat. I hate guys who, after 5 minutes of meeting them, will look me in the eye and ask, your place or mine? And still, I come here every Friday night in hopes of meeting dateable men. Listen, with all the pressure and all the natural desire in us to be with somebody, I think it's a real temptation to settle for less than something good. Don't go looking in the junk food aisle for a quick fix that is not going to satisfy you. Ladies, don't expect a guy who doesn't work hard for a living with his hands and his mind, that one day he's going to work hard for your heart. If he's not willing to honor your commitment to Jesus and respect your body and your purity, then he's not going to honor your commitment to Jesus and lead your family spiritually. That's the number one complaint I hear as a pastor with wives from church is that their husbands either don't go to church, or they're not as engaged as or they don't have a faith of their own. It's the number one frustration that the husbands don't lead at home spiritually. But some of you got that because you started dating somebody who didn't have a faith, and you just thought, I'll bring him around, right? I'll be a missionary dater, right? I'll show them Jesus, and they'll come around. But Proverbs says in chapter 13, verse 4, lazy people want much, but get little. But those who work hard will prosper. Marriage, if anything, is hard work. You want somebody who is going to work hard for you and with you in marriage, then you got to find somebody who is working hard on their own life. Some of you will decide to settle because you're not willing to be patient. Others of you, you'll settle because you don't realize your own value. You don't realize how valuable you are. How valuable God says that you are worth working for. You are worth waiting for. You're worth respect. Guys, you're single and you'll start to settle for something even sooner sometimes because in your mind, the only thing that really matters of whether a girl should be pursued is whether or not she's hot, right? I'll stay with her based on whether or not I think that she'll let me sleep with her. Well, first of all, you need to find the purity that God has for you, right? You don't need to be seeking a woman. You need to be seeking what God has called you to. You need to be free from lust, free from looking at girls like objects of your personal gratification. You wouldn't look at your mom that way. You wouldn't look at your sister that way. You wouldn't want another man to look at your mom or your sister that way. You wouldn't want your dad to look at your mom that way because if you saw him do it, you would barf in your mouth a little, okay? So why are you looking at a woman that way? Proverbs 31, verses 10 to 12 and then 30 to 31 tells us how fleeting this whole physical beauty thing is. Who can find a virtuous and capable wife? She is more precious than rubies. Her husband can trust her, and she will greatly enrich his life. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. Look at this. Underline this. Take a note if you're single. Charm is deceptive, and beauty does not last. But a woman who fears the Lord will be greatly praised. Reward her for all she has done. Let her deeds publicly declare her praise. Our culture is so preoccupied with appearances. And that value has bled over into most of our minds. We can't help it. We're surrounded by it all the time. But the truth is that God doesn't look at the things that you and I look at. When God values people, he sees what's on the inside. The Bible says the Lord doesn't see things the way we see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. You know that's true. And it can be so easy to settle for less when you can't see past someone's fleeting beauty. So don't grow impatient. Instead, resist the temptation to settle for less by doing this, by seeking God's standards. By seeking God's standards. Sometimes I have to teach Bible passages, especially when we get into like topical sermons, and this isn't necessarily what you want to hear, but I'm not called to tell you what you want to hear. I'm called to preach to you what the Bible says. And the Bible says in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, don't be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? What fellowship can light have with darkness? What does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? If you are a follower of Jesus, you should not be trying to get together and marry somebody who is not a follower of Jesus. And if you're dating somebody who's not in the place that you are spiritually, you might think the relationship is going well, but it's headed to disaster. It'd be like trying to build a house with another person, and you both are operating from two completely different sets of blueprints. It's not going to work. Once you're married, once you're all in on commitment, you're going to have different priorities and different values. You won't be able to agree on how to handle money. You won't be able to agree on how to raise the kids or what to teach them about God. And you think that you're going to bring that person around over time, but the reality and the truth is you're playing with fire. It is risky. Don't wait until it is much more painful later. much more difficult and complicated later. If you are dating somebody as a Christian who is not sharing your faith, you really ought to think about breaking that off today. Now, Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 7, if you are married to someone who does not share your faith, then you need to stick it out. You stay with that person. If you're not a follower of Jesus, you don't really have to follow any of this, right? This is all just sort of on the table for discussion. But if you're single and you're a Christian, you ought to heed this advice. I know breaking up can be hard. I'm not saying that doing what God has called you to do will be easy or even pleasant. Seldom is it easy to uphold God's standards, but you need to do this. And I guess just let me throw you a bone and give you some pickup or some breakup lines, the opposite of what I meant to say. Let me at least give you some breakup lines, right, that you can use. And those of you who have been broken up with, you've heard some of these breakup lines, and maybe it's just helpful to hear the translation of what they really mean, and somebody's given you these, and you kind of held on to them. Let me just say this. If somebody has told you and broken up with you and said, listen, I just want to be able to date around, what they're really saying is I've already found somebody else and I'm dating them already, right? Or they say to you, listen, I want to break up. Let's just be friends. What that really means is don't ever contact me again, okay? Or they say, you're too good for me. Anybody ever heard that one? What that really means is, I hope you're dumb enough to believe this line, right? Or I need time to find myself. You know what they really mean by that is, I need time to find someone else, right? Just like, give me some, or the classic line, it's not you, it's me, which of course really means, it's not me, it's you, right? And that's why we use that line. Listen, it's not easy to break up, it's not easy to be broken up with, but God is calling us, don't settle for less than his best. And some of you have been willing to settle when it comes to the person you're going to choose to date. And others of you, you're willing to settle for less than his standards while you're dating. You've been tempted in the area of sexuality. Let's be very clear. The Bible says in 1 Thessalonians 4:3, it is God's will that you should be sanctified, you should be holy, that you should avoid sexual immorality. It's clear from Scripture, sex is for the context of marriage. But the Bible is calling those of us who are not married to keep ourselves pure. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 3 and following, the Message paraphrase says this, keep yourselves from sexual promiscuity. Learn to appreciate and give dignity to your body, not abusing it, as is so common among those who know nothing of God. Don't run roughshod over the concerns of your brothers and sisters. Their concerns are God's concerns, and he will take care of them. We've warned you about this before. God hasn't invited us into a disorderly, unkempt life, but into something holy and beautiful, as beautiful on the inside as the outside. If you disregard this advice, you're not offending your neighbors. You're rejecting God, who's making you a gift of his Holy Spirit. So I realize this is tough. This flies in the face of everything our culture accepts. This flies in the face of what a lot of churches are cool with. But if you're aged 25 to 35, the number one temptation is sexual temptation. In fact, of the group that was polled, 90% of that age group agreed. Right? 90% of the people in that age group agree, yep, sexual temptation is the number one temptation. But one guy surveyed said, well, I know what the other 10% number one temptation is, lying, right? It's a big temptation. And I feel a little bit hypocritical talking to people who are single to avoid the temptation to give in. Because, hey, I'm married, right? Easy enough for me to say. Or even as one who struggled before I was married and gave in to that temptation repeatedly. It's got to be difficult to hear from somebody that you consider to be hypocritical in these things. It'd be like me taking you out to eat when you're on a diet and I'm not. And we sit down together and I order like the big basket of chicken wings while you order a salad, and my fingers and mouth are covered in hot sauce and blue cheese, and you're nibbling on lettuce. And I'm like, man, I'm really proud of you. And you're doing such a good job dieting. You keep it up. you know. And I'd imagine that's probably how you feel as a single adult, hearing from a married person telling you to abstain from sex. How am I going to tell you something that's new or fresh or helpful? Maybe I can't relate, but there is one who can. His name is Jesus Christ. The Bible says he was tempted in every way we are, and yet he was without sin. You know, Jesus was a real person. It bothers you, some of you, to think, did Jesus struggle with sexual temptation? Absolutely he did. And you don't have to raise your hands. Most, if not all of us, would have to raise our hand if we just simply ask the question, how many of you have been tempted to give into sexual temptation? A lot of us would keep our hands up if we had to say, and how many gave into sexual temptation? In fact, if God removed everybody in this room who has struggled with sexual temptation, I wouldn't even be speaking, but the room would be empty. Okay? There's no doubt in my mind Jesus was tempted. But the Bible tells us he was without sin. And Jesus is inviting us to follow in his footsteps and trust that God knows what is best. And we experience that only when we decide to do things his way. And I realize this is counter to our culture. In the 1970s, it was estimated there were about 500,000 couples living together in the United States who weren't married. In 1998, it was up to 4 million couples cohabitating. Today, it's estimated well over half of all people who get married were living together prior to their wedding. You add to that the fact that Americans are getting married at a later and later age, sometimes well into their 30s. We have all kinds of things like stayover relationships or living apart together, especially popular among young adults who are trying to, get stable financially or get a little further ahead in their career. And even of those people who are cohabitating, up to 25% say they're not really sure they'll ever get married, even if they're able. But what you need to understand is that just because culture says this is normal and acceptable does not mean it is wise. Even though many marriages begin today with cohabitation, couples who cohabit without that commitment of marriage first have a higher risk of separation. Not only is it not best, but one study reports that people who live together prior to marriage are 80% more likely to get divorced and 4 times more likely to experience depression as a married person. And if I could just encourage you with this, just because it is culturally normal, it is not God's standard or desire for you to be living together before you're married. And God has not given us his standards to make our lives difficult. God gives you his standards because he loves you. Because he wants you to experience better in this life. So do what he says, even if it doesn't feel right. Don't settle. Accept God's standards. Last temptation, just worth mentioning, is as a single person, the temptation is to focus on oneself. Maybe you've never been married, and by nature, we're all kind of selfish, but when you've never been married, you can be kind of self-indulgent. You can spend all your money on your hobbies. You don't have to live or share anything with another person. You got all the time, all the attention. But inevitably, that self-indulgent lifestyle leads to self-pity, self-absorption. Eventually, you can become depressed because all of your attention is just on yourself. And when you start to feel empty inside, you have a tendency to wallow in your loneliness, to sit on the couch at home and think about all the married people who must be out having a great time and enjoying dinner together, And so you'll sit there and you'll eat that carton of ice cream that you bought when you went to the grocery store hungry. And you're tempted to be self-focused. The escape for that temptation is to allow Christ to fill the void. Allow Christ to complete you. We started this message series referencing that old movie, Jerry Maguire from the 90s, with that beautiful line in the end, you complete me. But the truth is, if we were to check up on Jerry Maguire and Renee Zellweger, I don't think he still completes her or she still completes him, right? It wouldn't have lasted for very long, not that way. Marriage, as we all find out, doesn't complete you because no other person can. By the way, you can't complete them. Only God can fill the void in your soul because he's the one who made your soul and it is custom built for him. So you've got to find your completion in your relationship with Jesus Christ. Maybe you need to be reminded. If you're feeling lonely as a Christian, you're not alone. Christ moved into your life when you invited him in. When you wake up, he's there. When you're eating breakfast, he is there. When you're talking and thinking, he is listening. When you are heartbroken, he is consoling you. He laughs with you, he cries with you, he hurts with you, he celebrates with you. The Bible tells us repeatedly that God is with you. You know what's interesting, though? In the Old Testament, the Bible says over and over again that God was with them, or God was with him or her. To speak of the closeness and the proximity that God had when he was working in somebody's life or working in a nation's life, he was with them. But you know, there's a prepositional phrase that changes when we get to the New Testament. We start talking about people who are following Jesus. And it no longer says that Jesus or that God is with us, but in Jesus it says that God is in us. If you're a follower of Jesus, God is not just with you, he is in you, which means you are never alone. In our world, we start to believe that the best intimacy we can experience is between ourselves and a spouse, between a husband and a wife. But the truth is, the greatest relationship you will ever experience is the one you have with your Creator. And the only soulmate you will ever have is when you have invited Christ into your life. The most important relationship that we have in this life is with Jesus. So let me just simply ask you a question. Single or married, are you investing in that relationship? Because your relationship with Jesus and the time and the energy and the resources you put into that relationship will last a whole lot longer than till death do us part. It will last into eternity. And I realize some of you feel like you're running out of time. You're running out of hope for your future to ever get better. Maybe you've been single and you're into your 30s, your 40s. Maybe you find yourself middle-aged and you're single again. You know, you're a single mom or you're a single dad, and you just start to wonder, is this all it's going to ever be? You start to lose hope in what's left for your future. But listen, there is a whole lot more life that God has intended for you. Jesus came that you would have life and have it abundantly. And God has been writing this story since creation, and at some point he wrote himself into it as Jesus, who came and lived among us and lived a sinless life and then died on a cross so that our sins could be forgiven. And when he died on that cross and he was buried in that tomb, I'll bet there were a whole lot of people who believed the story was over and that hope was gone. But 3 days later, Jesus walked out of his own grave. He said, nope, I'm not finished. And some of you need to hear right now, you don't feel like there's a lot of hope or much of a future left? You need to hear Jesus say, I'm not finished. I've skipped ahead. I've looked at the end of the story. You know what happens? We win with Jesus. We win. And in between now and then, there's a lot of living to do. God's not done writing your story. But what he puts on the next page is up to you. Today could be the day where you hand the pen over to him and you allow him not to finish where you are with a period, but to put a comma. So I got more to write here. And this chapter has ended, but I'm about to start a new chapter. Have you handed him the pen? Have you said yes to Jesus? I want you to complete me. Have you put your trust in him, repented of sin, and been washed in Christian baptism? That's your way of saying yes to Jesus. And if you're ready to do that and you never have, we would love to help you make that step today. Or if you're just ready to make a commitment to this church family and say, you know what, I'm not going to put off living. I'm going to go ahead and live now. Man, we want to help you walk in that. Single, married, dating, divorced, it doesn't matter. You belong here in this family. Let me pray for you. God, I want to pray, thank you, first of all, that your word reminds us that, look, Jesus was single, but he wasn't lacking. He was our model, our example, that every one of us should follow. So, Lord, help us, regardless of our relationship status, to find our life and our value in Christ, in following him. Father, I pray that you'd bind up the brokenhearted and heal those who've been hurt. Father, I pray that you would help us each to live that calling to being the most healthy individual we can be, spiritually, emotionally. That we would bring that to all of our friendships and relationships. And Lord, if we're married, into our marriage, or maybe one day into that relationship, God, that we chose today to start doing the work on ourselves that's keeping us from fully surrendering to you. God, that we chose to be free from some of the distractions that come, that our world places on us, so that we could truly serve you with everything that we have, our whole mind, heart, soul, and strength. Father, I pray that you would tell somebody today that their worth is not found in finding somebody else, that they are loved and valued right now. Father, there are some that have settled, and I pray that they would realize that you've got better plans for them. There are some who are married and who are frustrated. I pray, God, that you would give them strength and help them have the courage to hand you the pen for the next chapter in their lives. Father, I pray for all of us as we seek to serve Jesus, who will seek him with all of our hearts. The scripture promises as we draw near to him that he'll draw near to us. And Lord, I ask all of that in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen.